They are defining symbols of big city life, but those gleaming condo towers are a deeply mixed blessing.
We're going to have a huge problem on our hands in 10 or 20 years.
It's not just a case of buyer beware, although there's plenty of that.
Welcome to my nightmare, folks.
This is my third attempt at a kitchen.
The lock itself doesn't actually turn.
These are people's homes we're talking about. Or are they?
The industry's not really set up to be a housing alternative play as much as it is a commodities play. Hey, Fazul, how's things in Dubai?
I'm Anne-Marie McDonald. DocZone plays the condo game. During the past decade, Toronto's skyline has altered dramatically, with the highest rate of condominium construction in North America.
The problem is it's spiraled out of control, and it's spiraled out of control because City Hall has never had the power to say no.
Is the individual condo owner now a mere byproduct of a fast-moving international money market?
There's all this hot money swirling around the world, trying to find a place to land.
With some developers putting profit before quality, it's become a case of buyer beware.
Developers essentially are running the downtown core in Toronto. They build what they want to build.
This is my view right here. This is sweet, eh?
Well, I'm paying about $1,700 a month to live here, and this is basically like camping.
It's a high-speed collision of corporate and consumer interests.
Everybody makes money all the way up the line. Poor Johnny consumer in the end gets what he's given.
Could Toronto and its citizens be caught in a game that's rigged against them? With Toronto's population estimated to add 2.5 million more people during the next 20 years, the city placed a big bet on the tall towers. The number of condo towers doubled over a decade to 1,300. And what was once an industrial wasteland along the shores of Lake Ontario became a mecca for millennials who embrace the downtown lifestyle. Then it started raining glass. During the spring of 2011, more than a dozen panes of glass shattered onto busy city streets, falling from brand new condos. Omar Jabri had just moved back home to Toronto from Manhattan and into Festival Towers when his brand new balcony shed a pane of glass onto the balcony below. And then, just 3 months later.
So I was walking home towards the building, and all of a sudden a pane of glass starts falling from midway up the building onto John Street below here on the street level, and breaks up into little shards of glass, scatters people.
When the glass started falling, it was like pigs flying. It was like planes falling out of the sky. That was a huge wake-up call. It made people say, hey, what the heck is going on here? Because if this is happening right now, what could happen 30 years from now? It made people ask, what are developers doing, or what aren't they doing?
Downtown Toronto became fertile ground for developers in 2005, when the Ontario government passed Greenbelt legislation to stop suburban sprawl. Add in almost 2 decades of low interest rates, an influx of foreign investor dollars, and Toronto experienced a condo boom unprecedented in North American history. To lock financing and start construction, developers need to pre-sell more than half the units in a proposed building. And in a hot market, buyers were very willing to oblige, often not realizing that the pre-sales pitch is just that, a pitch, not a promise.
Welcome to my nightmare, folks. I knew it was gonna be bad, but this is just awful. This is my new condo.
Realtor David Fleming bought a condo for himself in 2005 that was supposed to be ready in 2007.
So here we are inside my condo. It's like a goddamn tomb.
It wasn't ready until 2010, and the 3-year wait was not the worst of it.
How about deficiencies? How about changes from the actual artist renderings, where there was a pool on top of the building and the developer gave you a pool in the basement in P1?
It's gonna be real hard for two people to live here.
One day the phone rang, and the girl from the sales center told me, "We wanted to let you know that your 10-foot ceilings are now down to 8 foot, but we don't feel that as per your agreement, this constitutes any material change."
Ontario condominium law is like the Wild Wild West.
Lawyer Audrey Loeb has been nicknamed the Condo Queen. She handles hundreds of condo files every year.
The average consumer absolutely cannot understand the condominium documents today. I'm not sure that the average lawyer can really understand them. They're so complicated now and so lengthy, and there's so many qualifiers in them that even if we read them for a client and we give them to the client and we highlight them and we discuss it with them, all we can do is say, you're not promised really anything.
What's a lowercase l?
Loeb counsels her clients to be prepared to spend thousands more than the purchase price fixing up their brand new condos.
It's cheaper to fix them than it is to sue the developers. The developers have hugely deep pockets.
Consumers believe the condo game is about home ownership, when really, it's as much about money markets.
Some of these downtown condos are just vehicles for flipping and for money laundering and for tax evasion and for people to hide their assets away from for whatever reason.
The supply and demand is only that of money, not real estate. And that, I think, is the fundamental thing that everybody gets wrong.
In the land of snakes, there's always a king cobra.
King Cobra was realtor Charles Haynes' nickname when he was a top developer's sales agent in Toronto. Haynes has been in the condo game since 1979 and now represents buyers, almost entirely international investors.
Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, Russia's actually one of my key markets. We sold 86 units last year to people who've never come to the country, never looked at the condo, never seen the country. I've got repeat clients who've bought 6, 7, 8 condos through me, never having come to Canada.
Today, Haynes is on the hunt for empty buildings where suites might be going for bargain prices.
And if you see all of the white curtains on all of the windows, either you have the most consistent design concept within a building, or you have a whole bunch of unsold suites. So a guy like myself, I tour around town and I count the number of blocked windows I see in a completed high-rise. That's a developer with inventory that he wants to sell, and that's where the King Cobra steps back in. Hey, Fazul, how's things in Dubai? Cool. It's time for me to go and meet with the developer now and see if we can make some kind of a bulk buy. Absolutely, it makes it less affordable for Joe Average. The industry's not really set up for Joe Average. It wasn't set up to be a housing alternative play as much as it is a commodities play for investors.
There certainly are condos built as homes, built to last. The trick is discerning which is which. Of the almost 250,000 condo units in the downtown core, many experts think at least half are owned as investments, and nobody knows how much of that is foreign, partly because some investors use Canadian contacts to actually make the purchase.
Or they go down and get an incorporated company in Canada. It doesn't cost more than a couple $100. Now your company is buying it.
By the height of the market around 2011, investors were even reselling their purchase rights before buildings were finished and registered. The result was an unregulated market where no one pays taxes.
They were flipping their right to buy a building in a rising market for more money than they put down, and they weren't paying tax on it. The money was going out, and it should have been regulated by the Securities Commission.
According to Diane Francis, a conservative estimate of the tax loss in Toronto alone, $230 million in just 1 year. In early 2012, Canada Revenue Agency began penalizing Canadian speculators, claiming primary residence exemptions on condos they owned only briefly. But not before the feeding frenzy helped send real estate prices skyrocketing.
Global experts say that our real estate in part because we haven't had curbs on this kind of behavior, is 30% higher than it should be.
Francis warns of an affordable housing crisis on the horizon.
700 a square foot is a social problem and a political one.
Soaring prices fed the frenzy to build faster, smaller, cheaper. Bachelor and one-bedroom units are easier to build and to sell to investors who have no intention of living in them.
I bought a number of units in City Place for my global investors. However, I had as a prerequisite to any investor a verbal undertaking from them that they weren't planning on living in it or keeping it as a long-term hold, that they understood we would sell them out of it as soon as the building was done.
City Place is the largest residential development in Toronto's history, built by the biggest player in Canada's condo game. It covers 18 hectares of what was once the CN rail yards. When completed, there will be 25 tall towers at City Place and some 18,000 people.
It seemed pretty impressive. I think it's very eye-pleasing.
Kathy Stratty is your typical condo dweller. A young, single professional who migrated from the suburbs for a slice of the downtown life. She bought a 41st floor unit 5 years ago as a pre-sale.
I really wanted to live close to the core because it's where I work. I love the daytime life as well as the nightlife here in Toronto.
But when Kathy finally moved into her unit 3 years ago, there were problems, including the wrong bathroom.
The main bathroom was actually shown to have a glass enclosed shower.
The balcony was unfinished.
They were pretty much saying that this is what it is.
The heating system malfunctions.
In the winter, it can get very cold, and in the summer, it can get very hot because, of course, the cooling system doesn't work in here either.
But perhaps Kathy's biggest concern is simply getting in or out of her condo unit.
The lock itself doesn't actually turn. It actually happened about 4 times where I was actually trapped. God forbid there's a fire or something like that.
It took several weeks of emails, phone calls, and inspections to get the door fixed. And Kathy has spent thousands on repairs that weren't covered by warranty. Other defects, like the bathroom and balcony, she will have to live with.
You know, I think you just hope and expect, you know, kind of good workmanship and honesty from people that you buy from. And it just wasn't something that was delivered.
Stratty's problems are common enough in the condo game. Not so common, her willingness to speak up.
You can have deficient buildings, Joe consumer buying them, but they're afraid to ever disclose it to anybody, ever come out of the closet with it because they're ostracized. Worst case scenario is you can't sell it. So it's like the best kept secret in town. The dirty little secret. Your building has trouble? Say nothing.
There's little incentive to go beyond the minimum building code since developers realize their profit as soon as the building is complete and registered. So today's condos aren't as durable as 1960s rental towers, according to building scientist Ted Keswick.
The developer is in the same position, profit-wise, as the landlords of the tower buildings would be after 25 or 30 years. So, you know, we've sort of accelerated everything in the world that we live in. And it's all happening really fast. And when you do things that quickly, you wonder how well you can do them and you wonder how thoughtful you can be.
By summer 2013, there had been hundreds of legal actions filed against Toronto condo developers, including 11 lawsuits by City Place condo boards over problems like leaks in the parking garage and defective roof membranes. Realtor David Fleming won't sell there.
You've got balconies that are falling off to the point where property management has come in and locked the door to every balcony in the building. How could you possibly buy into a building where that's going on?
Kathy Stratty's friend Marnie lives in a neighboring building. She's just learned her condo corp is considering suing the developer over faulty pipes in the parking garage.
And apparently this piping was supposed to last for up to 20 to 30 years, and it's only lasted like 6 years, and they've replaced it all. It seems to be nonstop. I don't know what's going on.
When I can see the issues that we're having, and we're in year 3, I'm very nervous to see what year 10 is going to look like.
When we return, it all sounds frighteningly familiar to Canadians who suffered through Vancouver's leaky condo crisis.
It's condo rot and nothing but rot everywhere. It's show and tell time. There's no one in the world who should buy a condominium in British Columbia.
Fears about faults in quickly constructed condo buildings will flash some Canadians back 25 years to BC's leaky condo crisis.
The leaky condo crisis was really a way of talking about premature building envelope failure. It affected, I would say, hundreds of thousands of units.
In a booming market, developers were slapping up condos fast, and consumers paid the price in shoddy construction.
You had a lot of people who were speculators. They were buying, waiting for the price to increase, selling. You had a real kind of a flurry of activity happening in the real estate industry in every aspect. So everything contributed to what we were about to see in the late 80s and the 90s.
It's condo rot and nothing but rot everywhere.
The crisis led to a commission of inquiry into the quality of condo construction led by former Premier Dave Barrett.
These were innocent people who went into the marketplace and bought products that were faulty.
The leaky condo crisis cost BC $3 billion. The silver lining? A major overhaul of BC's condo industry. An overhaul is long overdue in Ontario, according to Rosario Marchese, who represents the condo-dense riding of Trinity-Spadina in the Ontario legislature. 3 times over 5 years, he unsuccessfully introduced bills calling for changes to the Condo Act with a focus on better consumer protection.
It's taken government a long, long time. I think they're afraid of developers, I really do. And I think the contribution of developers to various parties, not mine, but other parties, is quite hefty. And that speaks to one of the possible reasons why some governments are reluctant.
During the years between 2004 and 2011, developers gave more than $8 million each to the provincial Conservatives and Liberals. Not great optics for politicians slow to move on Condo Act reform. After the epidemic of falling glass, Marchese took a 4th run at the Condo Act. This time, the government at least agreed to a review. Given all the problems she's had with her condo, Kathy Stratty is now considering moving and renting out her unit. If she does, Stratty will join a growing crowd. In Ontario, there's no mechanism to restrict the number of rentals in a condo building.
I would venture to guess that 85% of all the new buildings in downtown Toronto that have been built in the last 4 or 5 years, or are in the process of being built now, are going to be somewhere between 60 to 80% rental units.
Oh, it's yours.
Catherine Hamilton and Ryan Bolton rent in the heart of Condo City. Much as they love living downtown, they wouldn't buy here. They think the area has been badly affected by investor ownership.
Yeah, and they own 20, 30 units in a building. Have no... Yeah, ownership, but no ownership.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think the foreign investment really, cares or gives a shit about the community or the built-up infrastructure for a sense of community in the area, because why would they? As long as they have the money, as long as they're sitting on the money.
One measure of the transience of the community? Some 14,000 people currently live at City Place, but only 370 children.
There are young families here. We have seen them, but they're few and far between.
Starting a family is a big reason David and Adrian Slover are putting their condo up for sale, even though they love the life.
The biggest allure about condo living is actually being out of the condo and in the community around it.
Well, I moved down in 2005, and on Front Street there were only 4 condos. And since that time, there's been a huge boom of condos going up. It's like a condo city down here. There's probably been another at least 30 that have gone up, and then there's a whole bunch of cranes and plans for even more to go up around here. So it's really changed.
So you have about 2 weeks to prepare.
Adrian and David have hired a professional stager to arrange their unit for sale. They want every advantage.
We could store that stuff away, maybe make some room.
With the balconies on the building next door under repair, they're worried they'll lose money.
You know, I've had coworkers say, oh, don't you live in one of those glass buildings downtown? And, you know, don't you guys all have falling glass?
Well, it's definitely not good for the resale value. And when people are going to come to look to buy the place, they might already have a negative bias against it.
But you can't simply blame the developer. While City Place is a target for criticism, Concord's other major Canadian development in Vancouver is often praised to the skies. After Expo 86, BC sold the old railway lands on which Expo sat to a single developer, Concord Pacific. Some 50 buildings would go up on the 80-hectare site.
I think Concord Pacific is a very good developer, but I think the Toronto development by Concord 8X, the Toronto arm of the company, illustrates what will happen if any developer, frankly, is just allowed to do what they want, fundamentally, and without the city shaping things. The difference between the Concord Pacific development here in Vancouver and the Concord 8X development in Toronto is the city. That's the difference.
Brent Todderan is an urban planner who's worked in Ontario, Alberta, and as Vancouver's chief planner. Concord Pacific Place predates his tenure, but Todderan's very familiar with its good qualities.
Well, the key when all of this was being done is it wasn't just being handed over to a developer and the developer came up with the vision. The city had a vision for what it wanted to achieve.
One thing the city wanted from Concord Pacific: family-friendly amenities. In the early 90s, there were just 200 children in Vancouver's downtown. Now, there are more than 5,000.
We use density to actually pay for daycare, and as well even school sites and even school construction.
Across from the school, and also part of the big package of amenities paid for by the developer, a busy community center built in the old railroad roundhouse.
If you design it right, families will come, and they've come in numbers that even exceeded our expectations.
So what happened in Toronto? According to Todderan, the fundamental problem all across the city is a system that doesn't give planners enough authority. The real power lies with the Ontario Municipal Board. Appointed by the province as a watchdog over municipal development, the OMB adjudicates all planning appeals, a system unique to Ontario.
The shadow of the board creates all sorts of dysfunctional actions and attitudes and approaches and relationships. And you don't see it until you take that shadow away. Everything changes. And I have to say, when I left Ontario, I went from lawyers being in virtually every meeting to Alberta, where I very rarely saw a lawyer. And in 6 years as chief planner for Vancouver, I can count on one hand how many meetings I had with an applicant's lawyer in the room.
Unfortunately, in our situation with the Ontario Municipal Board, we have this really simplistic way of looking at the world that says if you build Tower X on a certain site, the next owner can come in and build Tower Y or Tower Z, and they draw these little vectors from one tower to the other, and they say, you permitted this, therefore you have to permit that. And it's a totally dumbed down, idiotic discussion of how the future is shaped.
Critics say it's time for major reform to the century-old board.
We've got to change the rules. I'm arguing that the City of Toronto has its own act with a $10 billion budget bigger than most provinces in Canada, and it ought to not be treated as a child because they're mature enough to be able to make their own decisions.
Kit Kat Bar and Grill owner Al Carbone says too much condo development is threatening to kill Restaurant Row, the very reason people want to live down here in the first place.
You can't duplicate this restaurant. Doesn't matter how much money you spend. You can't plant a tree in a building that goes through the roof. It has a vibe that's special, and you can't create that in a new building.
Carbone appealed to the municipal board to stop a condo tower from obliterating a big section of Restaurant Row.
From Fred's not here. From there to Verona there's an application in for a 47-story high-rise tower.
All right, man. See you later.
Adam Vaughn is city councilor for the ward that includes both City Place and Restaurant Row.
I've scrambled to get the heritage protection in place, but I still have the OMB staring over my shoulder. And we have precedents of Shangri-La Hotel at 65 stories, TIFF at 47, M5E at 35. And at that point, I'm left standing in front of a court that uses property rights as a measuring stick.
City councilors feel pressure to support questionable projects and negotiate with the developer for community benefits. If they oppose and the developer appeals and wins at the municipal board, the city has few cards left to play.
As long as you're saying yes to really bad buildings, I've got very little power just saying the word no. Is it the way I want it done? No, we've been looking to reform the planning process since the day I took office.
Reform may finally be on the way, spearheaded by a powerful player new to the game since the condo boom ignited, and since the falling glass awoke the city.
We have been in a catch-22 for quite some time of being very reactive and in fact letting the development industry set the standard.
Chief city planner since early in 2013, Jennifer Kiesmat says it was sound neighborhood-based planning that made Toronto so popular. But the 1998 amalgamation of 7 municipalities into a megacity was a major distraction, just as the boom was about to hit.
Everyone was kind of looking back and figuring out, how are we going to make a policy framework, let alone getting out ahead, as we need to do today, of the growth that's happening in the city. So, we've just been whammed by amalgamation, whammed by all this growth. And now we're at a point where we're going, wait a minute, we actually need a better way to do this. We need a much more proactive way of planning the city.
Congestion is one of the issues facing the planning department, with the city's infrastructure bursting at the seams. But underlying it all, the need to somehow strengthen the city's hand in the condo game and put planning before profit. Today, Kiesmat will present City Council with new tall building design guidelines.
The reason this is most important, it provides clarity for the development industry, provides clarity for planning staff, but it also provides clarity at the Ontario Municipal Board. And that's in some ways, you could argue, where we need it most.
It's all part of a strategy to give the city real planning clout, including the power not just to approve individual buildings, but to plan whole areas of the city and then fast-track developers who build what the city wants.
It becomes very difficult to appeal those permissions at the Ontario Municipal Board. And that's a pretty big achievement for us. It's about looking at an area and saying, this is how we see this area growing in the future, and then entrenching it in policy such that that's what developers will be required to build if they'd like to build. That's a big shift.
But what about the sea of tall towers already spread across the city? As these buildings age, the glittering glass can hide a sea of troubles.
On days when there's high wind and driving rain from the lake, there'd be massive amounts of water in the living room, and you could just see all the floor damage here. That's all from flooding from the windows.
Across Canada's largest city, as these giant condo buildings age, the people in charge of maintaining them are hardly experts. Once a building is registered with the city, the developer's work is done, and the building is entirely the responsibility of the individual owners, gathered together in a newly minted condo corporation with a volunteer board, an amateur group who rarely see eye to eye.
The nature of the condo model is troublesome at best anyway. I was the president of a condo building, and believe me, it was the 7th circle of hell, getting people to agree on anything, even if it's in their best interests or in the best interest of the building.
Governance can become as bothersome as maintenance issues. And as buildings get older, the two together can be a lethal combination. 20 years ago, Christina Sobolak moved into a condo building on Lakeshore Boulevard, just west of downtown Toronto. It was the beginning of the condo craze.
Well, when I first saw this place, I just fell in love with the view. It's absolutely amazing. The first 10 years that I lived here, I was quite happy and I didn't have too many problems. But then in 2000, my nightmares started.
Defective windows that couldn't be left open were a major problem. And then there were the leaking pipes.
This is my third attempt at a kitchen in 13 years. It was almost completed. There was a massive flood in my unit, destroyed my cabinetry. Well, this is my only sink, only functioning sink in this unit. So it serves as my bathroom sink, my kitchen sink, and you can see just the flood damage. There's been floods in this room as well from, I don't know, pipes above me.
While Sobolak's unit is almost certainly in the worst condition, others in the building have faced water issues too. But Sobolak's the only one suing her condo board and going public.
She did all this in a weekend. Everything I'm scrolling by.
Sobolak hasn't endeared herself to fellow owners with the blog chronicling her problems.
It's a nuisance, an annoyance. It's like camping in Algonquin Park and a mosquito lands on your arm. You know, the very first one of the year, and you go, God, that's annoying.
Sobolak's latest blog post concerns the Condo Corp's plan to redecorate the lobby and hallways instead of focusing on structural and mechanical issues.
That's what I think they should be concentrating, spending our reserve fund on, not on cosmetic redecoration. That's just like putting icing on a crumbling old cake.
But when the board meets with residents, the decision is made to go ahead with the renos and replace the pipes later.
Welcome to my audience out there. You are listening to Linda Pinizzato of the Condo Expert.
However the Sobolak story ends, the president of the Condo Owners Association says it raises an important issue.
It's like the guy that has a bad roof, and at one side it needs repairing, but they let it go until the following year just to see if it could maybe get another year out of it, that type of thing. But cosmetically, they want it looking pretty. That mentality, honestly, is suicide for a condo building.
From politics to plumbing systems, volunteer condo boards are often ill-equipped to deal with the complexities of managing big buildings.
We don't require condominium boards to necessarily possess any type of specific expertise, and what you have is Cessna pilots trying to fly 747s. And the question is do you want to get on that 747?
As the boom generation of glass towers age, maintenance problems will multiply, ready or not.
New condominiums get their operating costs set by a study that the developer does, and the developer guarantees them for exactly the first year. Then a few years later, you find that, well, the glass seals aren't working, we've got to fix that, or the radiator pipes have to be fixed, or the cladding really isn't very good and has to be replaced in its entirety. And suddenly these bills can add up and add up to the point where people may, in 10 years, have real problems hanging on to their unit.
And what about the falling glass that started it all? Window wall exteriors are fast to install and terribly trendy. And the consensus seems to be that the rain of glass in 2011 might have been just a bad batch. But window walls are an environmental and maintenance nightmare.
In many provinces and many states and in Europe, it's illegal to have the floor-to-ceiling glass using this regular glass. And the problem is not just the energy loss, but there's also the problems of mold and the problems of maintenance and the thermal stresses created by this.
The overall maintenance picture is truly alarming when aging buildings are substantially investor-owned.
If you keep your maintenance fee down, your return on investment increases. And so as a result, the tall buildings, which are very tough to fix, are maintained poorly. And you can see the building standards aren't great. They're built quickly and they're built cheaply many times. And you can see tall buildings starting to spiral down.
I think there's a real problem with these monolithic buildings that are sold to foreigners or to speculators. I think the governance is going to be a nightmare. I think they are potentially going to become slums.
The fear is that giant homogeneous developments like City Place could go downhill fast.
I suspect this might follow the same sort of path and be the next St. Jamestown.
Originally built in the 60s to house the young middle class, St. Jamestown rapidly deteriorated. As of 2011, the mean income was 35% below the city average.
When tall buildings fall apart, you have a hell of a time fixing the problems that get embedded in them. I've had to remove crack houses from residential neighborhoods, affluent residential neighborhoods, poor residential neighborhoods. It's a hell of a task. Try doing it on the 17th floor of a high-rise. The police don't drive by on a regular basis, and the folks that live next door are scared to death. And so these tall buildings present an amazing set of problems, environmentally, economically, socially, to the city. And we've built more of them and built them quickly in Toronto than any other city. We're going to have a huge problem on our hands in 10 or 20 years.
Hard to imagine the city taking such a big gamble. But look at what's at stake. More than $250 million in fees from developers to the city just in 2012. The city badly needs the money to refurbish aging infrastructure, but there's a catch-22. The density inherent in the vertical city means greater stress on that already overloaded infrastructure. Kit Kat owner Al Carbone says blackouts at dinner time are hurting his business.
It's all falling apart. There's not enough power. The grids can't handle it. The street cars are jam-packed and the roads are gridlocked. Pedestrians can't walk on sidewalks. It's a mess.
Can it be cleaned up? Or is it too late for Canada's largest city?
We need to act very decisively and quickly if we really do want to be a city that has longevity.
Throughout 2013, Toronto condo sales roller coasted as buyers adjusted to tougher lending rules, a federal government intervention to prevent a crash that could cripple the Canadian economy.
We encourage prudent lending practices. We don't want to race to the bottom on mortgage rates by our financial institutions.
I think our real estate market is a lot healthier for having taken some of the air out of the bubble in the last year, with restrictions on lending, mortgage money, and with restrictions on CMHC. I think we've dodged the bullet.
Dodged the bullet for now. But all eyes are on a condo market that's too big to fail.
I mean, this affects everybody. This is a social issue. This is a socioeconomic issue. It's about protecting the financial system from this kind of bubble, and it's also about protecting the cost of housing so it doesn't get beyond the reach of the average Canadian.
That's what happened in Vancouver, where housing prices are out of sight, yet many of the units in the big condo development at Cole Harbour sit empty. They're second or third homes for wealthy jet setters.
Well, Cole Harbour is one of the most gorgeous settings on the planet, but there's no soul there. And it's jokingly called see-throughs, see-through city, because there's nobody in those apartments.
Mark and Tim Hiltz thought their container gardening business was a natural in Cole Harbour, but nobody was home.
First 2 weeks of October through until about the first week of April, there's just no one here.
So the Hiltzes are walking away from their dream business. Collateral damage in the condo game. In Toronto, the slowdown in the market may give politicians and planners a moment to catch their breath and focus on city building.
So all of this thinking on the 50 and 60 and 70-year build out of these neighborhoods has got to be done now, and it has to be done by government because the development industry doesn't do that. They build to sell tomorrow what sold yesterday, and they try to get it approved today.
Jennifer Kiesmat believes one key is family-friendly mid-rise density throughout the city. More sustainable and, in 2013's uncertain market, less risky for developers.
We have great swaths of undeveloped avenues or underdeveloped avenues in this city that present enormous opportunities to accommodate growth in a really sensitive way that will improve the quality of life for existing residents in areas adjacent to them.
Too late for Al Carbone. He lost the appeal to stop that 47-story building on Restaurant Row.
I'm pretty sad. We put a lot of time and effort trying to protect the neighborhood. We worked 30 years building it up, and now this one bad precedent, this one bad development will lead to other bad developments.
But all is not lost. The city is considering making this part of King Street a heritage district, so going forward, it would get special planning consideration. The Kit Kat itself is already a heritage building. At City Place, the developer is working with the Residents Association on community building events like the Farmers Market.
As people populate a place, it loses some of its sterility.
Toronto's chief planner believes the transition to a family neighborhood is just a matter of time.
I firmly believe that once the schools open, you'll see a complete transformation.
Still, David and Adrian Slover are moving to the suburbs. They took a 20 grand loss on their condo, but feel lucky.
Bye downtown. We definitely feel fortunate to have sold at this point. Yeah.
Omar Jabri, the man who literally watched the glass fall in the summer of 2011, lives just across from his old building. He and his wife Jan Gandhi are about to have their first child and plan to stay downtown. They're betting on the city, and they're not going to let a little falling glass scare them away.
For us, this is where we want to live. We want to build a home here. We want to be downtown. We want to raise a child here. And so it wasn't going to deter us in any way.
The city needs to make a concentrated effort to make sure that new developments can support families, support the future of our communities, which is going to be much more focused on downtown living.
And maybe the rain of glass that washed the glitter off the condo game will also nurture the notion that city building is about much more than money.
There's this false choice between economic prosperity and good planning. You know, good planning is the basis of economic prosperity. Smart cities know that.
We're at a bit of a tipping point. We have so much growth, and we have really significant issues that we face as a city. We can either get it right, or we can get it wrong. I'm really hoping we get it right.